Hello and welcome to Ideological. I'm your host, Zach Lee. And the episode today is going to be a little different than most of my other episodes. Usually I like to make jokes and talk about philosophy. There's times I'll talk about politics, but mainly the ideas behind them because I'm a philosopher by training. But there's a cultural issue that I wanted to discuss with you, and it is the recent killing of Charlie Kirk. Now, I want to talk about some of the social ramifications of that. I feel like that event, it's almost like right before the sun comes up. You can't see the sun yet, but by that, sun coming up, you can see everything else. I think that event showed a lot of things about our culture. I think it showed a lot of things about our education system. I think it showed a lot of things about the state of politics that we're in. So as I get into this lesson, I'll be honest, I'm a little bit insecure. I'm a little bit afraid that somebody is going to think that I'm being too political. They're going to put me in some sort of box or some sort of camp. And so let me just be really clear. I knew who Charlie Kirk was, but I've never listened to any of his things. I've never listened to even one debate or something like that he's done. So he's not somebody he runs in different circles than I do. There are probably some things where I would agree with him, probably some things where I wouldn't. This should be a bipartisan issue. Shooting somebody for expressing their freedom of speech, both sides should condemn. And so I want to go through some thoughts that I have, some of the social ramifications, some of the responses, some of the things that I've seen, and I want to talk about it ideologically. So this will be a little bit more somber, a little bit more direct, a little bit more intense, but I think that it can be helpful. So let me go over a few thoughts. There were many different responses to the death of Charlie Kirk. Some of them were helpful and some of them were not. One of the least helpful is when people celebrated that he got shot. Regardless of your view, that puts you on the weird fringe. Like when Barack Obama and Bernie Sanders and Gavin Newsom are all condemning it, as are, Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. When everyone's condemning it, if you don't, you are the weird fringe group, the weirdo on the outside of even whatever party you belong to. And so for those that celebrated it, you have to understand, if you celebrate that somebody was shot because you disagree with them, they weren't being violent, they were just expressing their First Amendment rights and their opinion. If that's you, you're an actual Nazi. You're an actual totalitarian. You're trying to crush anybody that doesn't agree with you. You are the oppressor. You are the thing you probably say that you hate, but you actually most embody. So anytime somebody is shot for expressing their opinion on a university, both sides should condemn it, right or left. So this is not a pro Charlie Kirk or again. It's to say, if you get rid of people's right to disagree, if you get rid of people's right to say and think and do what they want, I mean, that is the first step towards the gulags. That is the first step towards Auschwitz. That's the first step towards all those kind of things. So I do think that those that celebrated his death are true enemies of freedom. I also want to mention that Kirk is not some sort of weird extremist. You see a lot of that with the people that celebrated his death. There's a lot of he was a white supremacist and he was a bigot and he was a transphobe. Charlie Kirk was just a normal guy from 10 years ago. He just held views that almost everybody held in America 10 years ago. He's not some sort of weird, he's not a white nationalist or anything like that. He actually has several times expressed that even his religion would not allow him to be some sort of racist or whatever. When he talks to students very kindly about, transgender issues, he holds a different view. That doesn't make him some sort of mean monster or whatever. So again, he's not, a lot of people are like, yeah, he's got to be killed because he's a neo-Nazi, fascist, whatever. He's none of those things. He's a normal guy that disagrees with some of the postmodern theory going on in the U.S. That's it. He's not some crazy extremist. He didn't have a bomb on him or something like that when he was shot. He's just kind of a normal guy. Might be annoying at points depending on your views. You might not like it. You might think it's outdated. You're free to have whatever opinions you want. Again, I have my own opinions, but he's not some sort of weird extremist. I also think that, though I don't like everything that he said, his method was 100% the answer. So listen to this. We are currently in a civil war that just hasn't become hot yet. We are in a Cold War civil war where there's misinformation and spying and propaganda and all these things. It hasn't become hot yet, but it is a Cold War civil war. The only way to prevent that from becoming real war, a hot war, a real civil war, is to sit down across the table with somebody, to treat them like a human, and you both express your views and have an argument. Arguing is not bad. Arguing is great. It's a chance to sharpen your views and bounce them off other people. It's a chance to change your mind when you're corrected and you see that you're wrong. It's a chance to change somebody else's mind if they're wrong. Like sitting down with somebody else who's a human across a table, not just tweeting out and stuff, and having a deep conversation about things that matter is the solution. Because guess what? You can disagree with somebody and still love them. You've been told, you've been indoctrinated. There's been propaganda against this. You've been told you can't. If somebody's not in my tribe, they're the enemy. We must shoot them. Nope. You can disagree and still be friends. I've got friends all across the political spectrum. I've got friends all across religious spectrums. Cool. You know what we do? We sit down and have a drink and tell dirty jokes and we talk about deep things, and it's awesome. Okay. His method of coming to a campus and saying, you can say whatever you want and I can say whatever I want. You be respectful, I'll be respectful. And from what I know, the little I know about him, supposedly, most of his stuff was pretty, it might be offensive in the content, but his tone, he wasn't trying to be an ass or something. That his content is what mainly offended people, not his tone. His tone seems to be, he's not somebody that's just trying to punch people that he disagrees with. He is somebody that is trying to have a conversation. So I think his method is 100% the solution. How do we solve this? Freedom of speech, individual freedom, individual rights, individual freedom of speech is how you solve this issue for both right and left. Somebody who's a leftist has a right to set up a tent on a campus and let people ask questions and him give his views. Somebody who's on the right is allowed to do the same thing. Both can do it. That would be great. Without yelling, without chanting, without interrupting each other. Let's let the best argument win. If you are correct, then your argument will do the talking for you. You won't have to shoot your opponent. Your logic will destroy the opponent. The argument, your persuasion, your examples, those kind of things will win. You see, you have to crush dissent when you subconsciously and deep down know that you're wrong, because you know that you can't beat them in an actual debate. And so then there's things like shooting. I've also seen people say a lot that they've used this event to try to push their politics, which drives me nuts. Like, bodies are not even cold yet, and people are climbing over the dead to try to push their view of gun control or their political, like that. This is not the time for that. Like, after there's a school shooting or something is not the time to push your politics. It's the time to mourn. It's the time to be quiet. It's the time to try to figure out what would actually prevent it in the future. So I'm a little annoyed with people, and this is right or left, that are trying to push too many, let's wait just a second. Let's get all the details. Let's mourn with the family. Then let's figure out what's going on. But like the people pushing the gun control narrative on this issue, well, Charlie Kirk believed in gun rights, so therefore he deserves to get shot. You know who else believed in gun rights? Again, pretty much all of America for the longest time. The NRA used to go into schools and teach kids how to shoot so that they would do it safely, like in the 50s. And so that to me, the reason that's frustrating is if you say, okay, Zach, the problem's guns. Why did the gun shoot Charlie Kirk? There's a lot of people at that rally. Why not anybody else? Why didn't it shoot people indiscriminately if it's the gun? You can't answer that question by talking about gun control. You have to talk about the motive of the shooter. Also, what do you do when a legally purchased firearm by a legal adult is used, maybe it's even a hunting rifle or whatever it is, I'm not sure that we even know yet, is used just to shoot somebody from a far off distance? Like, what gun control would stop that? Well, Zach, we should just get rid of all the guns. There are more guns in America than there are people. Even if you tried to do that, you wouldn't get all of them. The bad guys would still keep them. You can make them with a 3D printer. Again, guns are 1,000-year-old technology. It's not like hard to make. And people would smuggle them across the border. So that won't work. That's a fake solution. I've got a whole episode, by the way, coming out soon on gun control. I'm just going to go over the statistics. Again, I don't give a lot of my political views. I do on this, though, because I think that just debating about it keeps getting people killed in the meantime. We need common sense gun control. We already have that, you idiot. You already have to be of a certain age. You already have to have a background check. You already have to not be a felon, not have a history of mental illness. You have to We already have very common sense gun control. I put up a post on social media recently just saying, hey, what would actually protect kids? Get your politics out of it. I'm tired of kids getting shot. What would actually protect them? And you'd be surprised that all the answers that people gave were just stupid answers. They're just giving their party line. Again, they're not thinking. They're not being critical. They're like, we should get rid of guns. Okay, you can't. The bad guys will still keep them. Okay, we should have gun control. We already have gun control. When people break the law, they don't care what the law is. I had mentioned maybe we have security or something at schools, and people are like, what about Uvalde? Zach Uvalde, like, we had security. It didn't work. We didn't have security. They ran away. If the security guard runs away, that's not having security at the school. Again, think about it. I'm saying, what if we had security that actually stayed there and protected the kids? Would that help at all? You haven't suggested anything that would help other than something that's unrealistic. Maybe bad guys will stop being bad and shooting people, which is a terrible. I had one guy respond and say, he said, you're an idiot because you know, what purpose does laws even have then, since bad guys are going to break them? And I was like, again, assume that I've thought about this first. The purpose of laws is not to keep bad guys from breaking them. Did you know that? There are laws against murder and bad guys murder. There are laws against stealing and bad guys steal. There's laws against drug use and there's drugs. If you think that the purpose of laws is to keep bad guys from breaking them, you're absurd. The purpose of laws is to provide a standard whereby you can judge and punish somebody if they do break them. When you create a law, the good guys will follow it, so it keeps the majority of people from doing it, and it gives a standard to punish the bad people when they break it. They're not scared of the law, they're scared of the punishment. But what it doesn't do is prevent them from breaking it. Okay, so it was insane to me how many people just thought, well, if we just make more laws. I mean, that's not how laws work. But again, we'll get into that in another lecture. My point here is to say, stop using the death of a father, of I think a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old who's just expressing his opinion, whether you hate him or not. He could be the worst guy in the world, but he has a right to express his opinion. Stop using that to push your weird views on whatever political issue is your hot topic, right? So perhaps, let me punch against a lot of those I've seen on the right as well. Perhaps the thing I've been most annoyed by with the death of Charlie Kirk is the response that comes from religious leaders. Okay, now let me be clear. If you're somebody who's posted, you know, my thoughts and prayers with the family, and I'm praying for them, and this shouldn't happen, and how awful, that's totally fine. Okay, I'm not talking to you. If you're somebody that's literally like, man, how awful, I want to pray for their family, go for it. I don't think you're doing anything wrong. I think that is a kind thing to do. My frustration is primarily with religious leaders. I've seen this with imams. I've seen this with Jewish rabbis, but I've mainly seen it within like evangelical Christianity, where pastors, and by the way, probably the people that give the most unsolicited advice are pastors, where they say something like this: forgive your enemies. Yeah, I'm fine with forgiving your enemies. What the hell does that have to do with this? Are you saying the government shouldn't pursue a murderer? I don't have an enemy. The shooter is not my enemy. I don't even know that guy. Like, it's a true thing. You should. I like the idea of forgiving your enemies. I think that keeps, you know, vengeance and all these kind of things away. I think that's great. That's just not what we're talking about. It's almost like if you said, hey, don't eat too many sweets and make sure to eat your vegetables. I agree with that. We're talking about what should we do to prevent more people from getting shot. What should we do practically so that people can express their opinion? And when you give just some sort of religious platitude that's not really relevant here, I don't know if you know what you're doing. I agree that if somebody personally offends you, you should forgive them, totally. That doesn't answer the question people are asking. What should the government do in finding this? How can we prevent this from happening in the future? How can we tone down the violent rhetoric between left and right so this stuff doesn't keep happening? That's the question. That has nothing to do with forgiveness. Or I've seen a lot of, again, and it's primarily Christian pastors that do this, but I have seen it from some other religious groups too, where they just all of a sudden say things like, oh my gosh, one day God will make everything good. Or one day in heaven, things will be great and we won't have to deal with this. Or, you know, come quickly. Or it's these, again, religious platitudes. That's not the question people are asking. If God will one day make things better, great. What about now? We're talking about now. Again, most religious leaders, especially evangelical pastors, you should probably shut up when events like this happen because you're not qualified to speak on it and you're not even saying anything that's helpful. If God will one day make everything right, awesome. That'll be awesome in the future. What do we do now? All I hear you doing is say, be warmed and well-fed, and not actually helping. Do you know why you're doing that? It's because you're virtue signaling. You're too much of a coward and you're too spineless to stand up and say what would actually help people. You're too much of a coward to stand up and say, hey, here's practically how we could do this. Think this way. Here's practically how we could do this. Read these books. Here's practically how we could stop things like this. Vote this way. You're too much of a coward to do that. And so you think that you can stay above it all, that you're so enlightened that you don't have to say anything practical. You don't actually have to help people push back what's evil now because you can just deal with it later. You're like a monk in the Middle Ages that's like, hey, who cares about this life now? We've got this better one coming, which causes you not to make any change and causes you not to actually do something that could love and help people now. Okay, so for all of those that are just sending out some sort of third wayism, both sides are bad and we should do better than this and maybe Jesus will come back soon and, make sure that you don't get, what they're saying to you is this: don't care too much about politics. Don't care too much about things that are going on. Which, again, regardless of your worldview, I think is insane. Even to them, I would say something like, I think it's 1 Timothy 2, says that you should pray for your political leaders so that you might live a peaceful and quiet life. The Bible itself is going to say, care about what's going on because God cares about you having a peaceful and quiet life. So when pastors are like, don't make it too political, don't care about living a peaceful and godly life, don't do anything practical, what they're really doing is they're just trying to show you what side they're actually on without saying it. And the side that they're on might not be the same side you're on. And so just know that that's what they're doing. It's an attempt to virtue signal and act like they're so holy, they're so above it all, they're so above the politics that if you want to be helpful, tell people how to have arguments with people they disagree with and how to, exist in a society that is very torn by different ideas. If you want to tell people what to do, talk about the good and bad parts on both parties, but don't make it sound even when it's not even all the time. Sometimes one party's more at fault. Other times another party's more at fault. Let's talk about that depending upon the issue. This also brings up the issue, the assassination of Charlie Kirk. What is the purpose of a university? The purpose of a university is where you as a student come in there and you come in with ignorance. You don't know the things and you are challenged. You are taught how to think. This is why, and I'll have a whole episode on the history of the university at some point, but this is why you originally had to study the liberal arts and stuff. Even if you wanted to be a doctor, even if you wanted to be a lawyer, before you could do that, you had to learn how to think. You had to learn logic and grammar and Latin and how to debate and all these kind of things. That is no longer the purpose of the university, especially not in the U.S. It's better in other places. The U.S., it's pure indoctrination. You should come out of college disagreeing with your professors, not parroting them. If they've really done their job and they've taught you how to think, you should come out of college disagreeing with them, not parroting them. So when universities only admit a certain type of student, they use certain policies to exclude other types of students, they repeat and indoctrinate and only push on one side over and over and over again, that's not the purpose of a university. Of all the places Charlie Kirk could have been shot, the one that makes the least amount of sense is a college campus or a university. The purpose of a university is to be able to express ideas and hear ideas that you disagree with without becoming emotional, without ranting and crying and doing all these things that show the lack of an educated mind. You understand that most of world history, passions were thought to get in the way of truth. Your emotions, you feel them very strongly, but they're not logical all the time. And so I can sit down with somebody that I totally disagree with, and they can go through all their sides, and I am chill. I'm like, okay, that's a good point. Well, I don't agree at this point. Here's why. And then I'll get up and give my view, and we can shake hands afterwards, and we can go grab a beer, and everything is fine. The intentional, stoking people's emotions to make them activist only in one direction is not a real education. You're being used to again, the Nazis, the communists under Stalin, all these mass genocides and stuff that have happened in different places across the U.S., it's when people don't allow dissent. If you're somebody right or left, and you don't think somebody should get to think their own thoughts, say what they want to say, have these kind of freedoms that Americans have traditionally believed in, you are the bad guy. You are the oppressor. You are anti-intellectual. You are anti-freedom. You're anti-democracy. Let me say this. I've been pretty clear on this. I'm not a Donald Trump fan. So let me be really clear before I say this. I'm annoyed, though, when people are like, he's a Nazi fascist taking over the country. And I'm like, more people voted for him than Kamala. He won the Electoral College votes. He won most of the states. So love him or hate him. He's the democratically, legally elected person that people wanted in America. When you start saying, oh, he's the enemy and so are all the people that voted for him, you're actually against democracy. Again, not a Trump fan myself. I actually have a lot of criticism for him. But you can't say that he wasn't the people's choice. So be careful. Again, the rhetoric of saying everyone on the right's a fascist Nazi, or even those on the right saying everyone on the left is here to murder me. I think those are super unhelpful. Almost done. What is the solution? I think that open discussion is the answer. The only way out of this is through. Be wary of anybody that tries to not let you hear the other side. That's what shooting somebody in the middle of a free speech platform is, by the way. They don't want people to hear Kirk's views. That's why they did it. Remember, canceling safe spaces, taking certain books off Amazon, not because they're pornographic and little children shouldn't read them. You should certainly make sure that kids cannot get access to something like that. But taking things off Amazon because you don't like the ideas. There's no pictures. You don't like the ideas that it supports. I mean, that is Nazi book burning. Stop doing that. Safe spaces, all these kind of things, blacklisting people because they have a different view from you, firing them because they don't hold. You understand that is what oppressors do. They don't want you to hear the other side because if you hear the other side, you might not agree with them. And the postmodern puppet masters can't have dissent. They want you to agree with them so they can control you, so that they can be in power. That's what they're doing. You're a pawn. We give a word to the right and to the left. To the right, do not retaliate. Do not retaliate. Why was MLK so much more successful than Malcolm X? They're both fighting for civil rights. Here's why. Because MLK did it peacefully, whereas Malcolm X was angry and aggressive. If you retaliate, you just make it worse. So this shooter, by killing Charlie Kirk, didn't kill Charlie Kirk. He just made a nation of Charlie Kirks. It's like a hydra. You cut off one head and more heads grow. So if you're on the right, do not retaliate. Also, do not read all leftism onto one guy's action. Okay, that shouldn't have to be said. Now, are there ideas and rhetoric that might have led to this? Yeah, let's talk about that. But in the same way, like if you're on the right and somebody were to shoot somebody on the left, you would not want the left saying everyone on the right agrees with that. That's one person's lone action. Those who are on the left, I would not use this as a time to gloat that you've felled an enemy. I would use this as a time to consider if maybe the us versus them rhetoric, maybe the friend-enemy rhetoric, maybe you've been indoctrinated, maybe you've been pushed only in one direction. How many right-leaning media sources do you follow without just criticizing, but actually to hear the argument? How many friends on the right do you have? Those on the right, how many left-wing media things do you watch and read? Not just critically. I always want everyone to be critical on both sides, but to actually try to understand and not to just make fun of it and send a meme. How many friends on the left do you have? Okay. I want to end by saying this. Groups, pay attention to this because this could heal this situation in America and it hopefully would change your politics. Groups cannot act. Only individuals can act. Pause for a second. What I just said is huge. I'm not saying that you can't ever use group titles to classify people. Men, women, cops, black people, whatever it is. What I'm saying is when you start thinking that groups are not just collections of individuals, pause for a second. Groups are just collections of individuals. Without individuals, there are no groups. That's what a group is. It's a collection of individuals. When you start thinking of all politics through groups, you start thinking they did this to us, so we're going to do this to them. That is asinine. That makes no sense. If my family was killed by an accountant, I would not be like, time to go get some accountants. That would be ridiculous. But for some reason, we think of the world that way. It's very strange. Black people as an amorphous group don't commit a crime or whatever it might be. Maybe an individual black person does. White people as a group are not being racist. A group can't be racist. Only individuals in the group, individual white people, can be racist. Cops, a faceless, nameless entity, doesn't shoot people. Individual police officers shoot people. Sometimes they're justified and sometimes they're not. Men, as a faceless, amorphous title, doesn't sexually assault women. Individual men might sexually assault women. Stop thinking of the world as acting as groups. Liberals as a whole did not shoot Charlie Kirk. One individual did. Now, did a bunch of other liberals promote violent rhetoric? Sure, but even that's individuals. That's not all of them, okay? Are there right-wing guys that have called for some sort of retaliation and violence? Yes, but that doesn't mean the right has. It just means one weirdo has, okay? If you would realize there are no groups, there are only people within groups, and those individuals do actions, not the group, it would solve so much of this. Stop thinking my group versus their group. A group in the past oppressed this group this group was individuals that belong to certain groups. Sure, an individual can belong to a group, but the individual is the one who acts. The group doesn't vote, right? It's not like when there's an election, whiteness votes or blackness votes. Individual white or black people vote. Individual Democrats or Republicans vote, or whatever it might be. Stop thinking of everything as groups and retaliation and like history remembers. Like Hegel is wrong and Marx is wrong, and I've got episodes coming out on both. And so that is not the way forward. The way forward is to forgive. The way forward is to work for more freedom of speech. It is to hold those accountable who've done terrible things. Thank you for joining this unique kind of emergency session, if you will, of Ideological. I hope that you tune in next time, and we'll talk about something that maybe is not so heavy. Thanks so much for joining.